So today, instead of working on that, the Civic, I have to be working on this, the Subaru, which is my daily driver. The other day I was changing my fog lights, and I had something happen to me in the Subaru that it's never happened to me before, and it was terrifying. To change the fog lights, you have to jack up the car. So I was jacking it up from the center jack point on the subframe. I was jacking it up, and it slipped off the jack point, and car came slamming down. Fortunately, I wasn't under it, otherwise I would be very much dead. But yeah, car came slamming down, jack caught on the oil pan, and just a gush of oil comes and hits the pavement. And I was just like, for sure that I had just cracked my oil pan or punctured a huge hole in it. But no, it was much worse than that. The oil pan is totally fine. There's no holes, no cracks. Oil is completely full still, no leaks. What had happened is when the jack caught the oil pan, the force of the car ripped up my motor mounts, both of them. So both of my motor mounts are just shredded. So the OE motor mounts for the Legacies, they come pre-lubricated. There's oil inside the actual mount. So if you tear the outer bushing or the outer boot, oil just comes pouring out of it. So that's what it was. It was the motor mount oil, not the motor oil. So nothing's wrong mechanically, but the motor mounts are a huge pain to change in these things. Two of the bolts are super easy access. The third bolt, the back bolt, is ridiculously hard to access. So you have to do something that completely terrifies me. You have to lift the engine. So you have to block wood under the oil pan, and you actually jack up the engine, which you have to do that to do spark plugs as well, and it scares me every time. My heart is in my throat every time I do this. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do today. I have the motor mounts, I got replacements. I just got to get everything off and get to that back bolt. It's that one bolt that causes all this problem. So here we go. All right, just so you get a sense of what had happened, I was jacking from right here. This is the center jacking point on the subframe, and the jack slipped off and caught right here. You can see this dent in the oil pan. That's where the jack caught. So as the car was coming down, the subframe, the oil pan pushed that motor up, and it completely shredded this motor mount and this motor mount. These are shot. So whenever I turn the car on, the motor just does this. It rocks and clunks and smashes up against the subframe. So this is something that, yes, it's not a mechanical failure in the motor, but you do not want to drive around with motor mounts that look like that. You will destroy your car. So I got to change these out. So the first thing you do, there's 3 bolts that are holding these into place. That's one right here. There's one right here that attaches it to the subframe, and then there's another bolt behind here. So this is the steering rack. It's sandwiched between the steering rack and the header. So you can't get your hand back there. It's physically impossible to get your hand back there to get that bolt. So you have to jack up from the oil pan and lift the engine and lift that motor mount off of this subframe so you can snake your hand back there and get the bolt. It's just one bolt that causes all of that problem. I mean, Honda figured this out. The motor mounts are easy to get to, the bolts are easy. Subaru decided to bury one bolt way in the back. So it sucks, but we're gonna get it done today. I'm sure there's a different way to do this, but, well, if there is a different way, I don't know about it. For me, you have to remove your headers to get access to these bolts, and you are going to be lifting up your motor, so it needs to be disconnected from your mid-pipe. So, yeah, there is an O2 sensor in the header itself. I just leave the O2 sensor installed and I unplug it from the harness up in the bay, and it'll just snake its way back down. So I leave that installed, and then the header just comes out as one big unit, right? So here, I've already removed most of the bolts, I just need to remove the very last one. But the header, it does need to get out just to give you plenty of access for the motor mount. When you do your header, there's going to be 3 gaskets, right? There's going to be your gasket to the head of the engine itself, and then there's going to be a gasket between the mid-pipe and your header. So you're going to want to replace those. They're really common parts. You're going to find them in a car at like AutoZone or O'Reilly's. So not a big deal, but the headers, they can be stuck on there pretty bad because it's an exhaust piece, so it's taking a ton of heat and then cooling really fast. So these can get stuck on there pretty good. I shoot them with PB Blaster, let them soak for about 30 minutes, and they spin just fine. So let's get the rest of this header off, and then we'll start tackling the really scary stuff. Okay, your O2 sensor clip is going to be right here next to your main harness clip. It's really easy to find. There's going to be a yellow wire that comes right up to here, and it'll snake right along your brake lines and right along the frame rail and made up to your header. Right, so this is your mid pipe and this is your header. So this is the gasket that's between your header and your engine block, and it's going to look the same on this side. So here's the gasket. This side's easier to work on. Driver's side is easier. There's not as much stuff in the way. So I just put the bolts right back where they come from. I don't like having stuff on the ground and I lose bolts. So it goes right back. Just put the gasket back up there too so I don't lose it. These gaskets are still in really good shape. These don't need to be replaced, but I'll probably replace them anyway just because I'm down here. So now, with the header out of your way, now comes the scary part. Now we're going to start lifting up the engine. You're going to need to remove this bolt. This is what attaches your engine mount to your subframe. That bolt comes out, and then this stud has to go and clear this subframe. So you've got to push it up the length of that bolt, and it's not a little distance. It's pretty big. And then that should give you enough room to snake your hand back and access the rear bolt of the engine mount. So let's get to that stage. And if you're a praying man, this is where you want to start praying. So the nut has been removed from here, and just keep in mind that that nut is going to have a washer behind it, so keep track of the washer and the nut. I'm just going to put it over there so I don't lose it. So now this can go up and down. It can leave this subframe, so that's good. And then I just go ahead and I crack these loose. It's probably not necessary, but I just do it right now and everything's where it should be. These are not torqued on there like crazy tight, so don't worry about these. They're not going to be too hard to spin loose. I think the torque, the foot-pounds on these, I need to go double check, but I think it's around 60 something. So these aren't too bad. They'll come right out. So with both of these nuts removed, this one and this one, now this subframe is free, right? So I'm going to start jacking up from the oil pan, and I'm just going to jack it up until that bolt clears the subframe, and that should be as far as I need to go. Sometimes you do have to go further, and that requires you to remove the top mount intercooler and loosen your dog bone. But that's super sketchy, because technically if you remove that dog bone and these two motor mounts, your engine is not attached to your car. The only thing holding it there are your fuel lines and brake lines and electrical, so it's just a free floating engine, and that's super sketch. So I try never to do that, but sometimes you have to. So let's start doing the scary part and getting this it removed from the subframe, jacking it up. This back bolt has proven to be insanely difficult. I finally got it to break loose, and I've been at this literally 4 hours. Once the header is removed here, so this is the front of the car is this way, back of the car is that way, I access the bolt right here. This is the subframe, this is the engine block. I had to use an 18-inch breaker bar, and you can sneak it up into here and get it on that bolt and spin it. You can do it this way. Some people can do it from the back, so you're reaching your arm over the steering column. I couldn't get enough leverage. I could get my wrench on it, but I couldn't get enough leverage to break it because this bolt, like as you can see, they're recessed into the actual mount, so you have to have a box end wrench to get down in there, but I could not. My wrench wasn't long enough for me to get enough leverage, so 18-inch breaker bar saved the day, and that's how we got this to spin. But seriously, this has been 4 hours of just this mount. Ugh. Alright, let's get this all the way out. Okay, a note on orientation, okay? So you'll notice there's a long flange and a short flange, and then you'll have your stud and then a centering pin. So this is the part that goes into the subframe. So this long end needs to be toward the front of the car. So long end forward, short end toward the back of the car. And then this will just center itself into the socket of the subframe. So long flange forward, short flange back. All right, I finished with the Subaru. I started working on that at 11 a.m. on Saturday, and I didn't finish until 8:30 p.m. that night. So it honestly took me all day to do it, and it sucked. But it's all finished now, and I am definitely never going to do that again. But it got too late and too dark for me to show you kind of the wrap-up things that you need to do to finish the install. So I'm just going to talk you through those really quickly. They're not major. If you've gotten that far in the process, this is going to make sense to you. It's nothing crazy. So let me show you. So once you have the motor mounts themselves installed and all the bolts in place, the tricky part is to get the engine to meet up with the subframe again. Because when you lift the engine up and out of the subframe, the engine doesn't just come straight up. It comes up and goes back a little bit and probably cocks to one side. My engine, when it came up, back, and it slid this way. So it was really close to the frame of the car. It was almost touching the frame of the car. On this side, on the driver's side, on the passenger side, there is a big gap between the engine block and the frame. So that's pretty common from what I hear. The engine is going to come up and it's going to kind of slide to one side. So what you have to do is you have to find a way to leverage your engine back into place. Because on the engine mount there are two, there's the bolt and then there's a centering pin. So I have my old mount here. So this is the bolt that meets up with the subframe, and then the centering pin is there as well. So these both have to slide into the subframe. So the best way that I've found to do it is to do it from the top of the engine. Doing it from the bottom, you don't have enough leverage to get the engine to move where you need it to. So my engine was up and to the driver's side. So I was able to put a pry bar between the frame of the engine, the frame of the car, and the engine block. And I was able to leverage from here to get that motor to slide over and to get my centering pin and my bolt to slide into place on the subframe. It's going to take some time, especially if you're on your own. You just have to do it by tiny movements, right? So lift the jack a tiny bit, move over, lower a tiny bit, leverage the engine some more. You just have to go back and forth. You don't want to do it in big jerking motions. You're going to break something. It is possible to do on your own. I did it by myself. It took me a good couple of hours to do it, honestly. If you have another person, it's going to go much quicker. But you can do it on your own. So that's my last bit of advice for this install is work from the top of the engine to get it into position so it can fall into the subframe. So that's going to be a wrap on this install on the Subaru. I hope it's helpful for you. The likelihood of you having to do this is pretty low, honestly. The engine mounts from Subaru are really sturdy, really robust pieces of equipment. Mine got destroyed just from a stupid accident of me dropping it off of the jack, which I still don't know what happened, but I'm just glad I wasn't under the car when it slipped. I mean, there are other motor mount options out there, like if you want to do solid mounts or a more aggressive kind of mount, this is the process you're going to have to go through. You're going to have to lift the engine, rip those old mounts out, put the new ones in, readjust the engine so it falls into the subframe. It sounds pretty straightforward and pretty easy, but let me tell you, it's going to take a lot longer than you think, especially if you're doing it on your back in a driveway like I did. It seriously took me all day Saturday. But it's done now, so problem solved, and I can move on with my life. And I saved myself about $1,200 doing it on my own. I actually called a mechanic and asked them just give me an estimate, and they gave me an estimate of about $1,600 to replace my motor mounts, which I only called one place. They might have just been giving me the go away number, but I don't know. It sounds pretty realistic to me after knowing what you have to do to get this thing installed. So I'm happy I saved a lot of money, and I'm happy I never have to do it again. Alright guys, if you have any questions, let me know. Also, if you guys have done this before and you saw things that I did just completely wrong, and that you know a better, easier way to do it, by all means, tell me in the comments, because this was a huge pain in the ass to get done. But you can do it. We'll see you guys in the next one.